Hey guys, this week I have a much requested video for you guys, and it is how I take notes for school and kind of how I study with them. So some things about myself: I'm currently studying Rotman Commerce at the University of Toronto, but I mainly took STEM courses in high school, so like chemistry, physics, math, and I used the same note-taking methods back in high school. So yeah, hopefully these tips are helpful no matter which classes you're studying for. So I'm going to quickly go over the materials that I use. The basic black pen that I use for all of my notes is the Muji Gel Pen in 0.5mm, and I only use black. As you can tell, I go through these pens so quickly, so I always get the bulk packs to save a little bit of money. They are just super smooth, and I definitely recommend for you to try them if you have a Muji nearby. Staying with the Muji theme, I also use the Muji spiral notebooks, and these are slightly smaller than the standard A4 size. I strongly prefer spiral notebooks for note-taking because it is just so much easier to flip through the pages. And lastly, for my highlighters, I use the very famous Zebra Mildliners. I have all three of the basic packs, and my sets look a little bit different because I actually took all of the colors out and regrouped them by color family. I have the blues and purples together, the greens and yellows, and the warm tones. These are dual-tipped markers, and I love how I get so many color choices. And now we're going to move on to my first tip. So my first thing is that it is okay to rewrite notes. And the reason why I say this is because I watched a lot of note-taking videos during my time as a student, and I noticed that a lot of them say that rewriting notes is a waste of time, and I definitely agree to some extent. But for me personally, I am not afraid to admit that I am not a very smart person. When the professor is lecturing, I tend to not know what's going on. Even if I read the textbook beforehand and all of that, in lecture, it is just too quick for me. I can't process what is happening. So my notes tend to be very messy, and it's just what the professor says. And of course, notes are useless if you don't understand what you wrote down. So for me personally, rewriting notes is a way for me to learn. It definitely takes a lot longer for me to study than someone who can understand the material right there in lecture, and I definitely envy those people, but I'm not one of them. So this tip doesn't apply to everyone, but if you're someone who learns best by rewriting notes, definitely do it and don't think of it as a waste of time. My second tip is to create a margin in your notebook if your notebook paper doesn't already have one. I use this gray gel pen from Muji and a clear acrylic ruler to create all of my margins. I use my margins to write down all of my titles, and the reason why I do this is because I find that it's so much easier to look for a certain section if the title's isolated. If I'm looking for something, I can just quickly skim the margins and I'll find it right away, as opposed to if I were to integrate the titles with the rest of the notes, I would basically have to skim the whole page. And for me, no matter how bold I make the titles, I just find that it's such a nuisance to look for what I need, so I definitely prefer the margins. My third tip is kind of weird, and it is highlight first and then write on top of it. And before you guys start looking at me like a weirdo, I have been doing this since elementary school and I love it. So the main benefit of highlighting first and then writing on top of it is that, of course, your ink doesn't smear. If you are a stationery addict like me, then you can probably understand my heartache of a stained pen. Usually markers and highlighters will have that really ugly gray stain from smeared ink, and even as a kid I couldn't handle that, so I just started highlighting first and then writing on top of it. And yeah, the downside is that of course sometimes you can over highlight, you can under highlight, but honestly I've been doing this for so long that I kind of just know how much ink I need to put down. And yeah, I am just left with a crisp set of notes, and I never have to worry about the pen that I'm using so it doesn't smear. If any of you guys do this or try this, definitely let me know how it goes because I am trying to get all of my friends to do this, but they all think it's weird. Tip number 4 is kind of personal. I really like color gel pens. I have them from many different companies and I always buy them, but I do not like to use them for my notes. It might just be because my eyes are really bad, but I just find it so straining to read my notes if there are color gel pens in it. especially because the lines are usually so thin. It's just really tiring for me to read, and I don't want to spend any extra ounce of effort reading my notes, so I tend to just use highlighters and black pens for my notes. Even if the highlighter is super bright, in the end you're still writing on it with a black pen, so it's really easy to read. Tip number 5 is to utilize sticky notes. Most of you guys probably already know that I have an obsession with sticky notes, and for note taking, usually I will use them if I have to add on any extra bits of information that I forgot the first time around, and maybe I already moved on to the next chapter, so it is too late for me to continue my notes. So yeah, in those cases, I'll just write the extra notes on a sticky notes. These are from my shop, and I just stick them onto the page. So I also love those plastic page flags from, I think it's a Post-it brand, and I own several packs of them. And the reason why I don't really use them is because the packs come with so little of each color that I am scared that I'll run out. So I highly recommend these Muji tiny page flags. I think you get 800 page flags for $2.50, which is a great deal. And that way I can go ham with annotating everything. I especially love marking the different chapters of my textbook. So after you're done with readings and note-taking, my tip number 6 is to teach everything to yourself. If it's possible, I would highly recommend for you to say everything out loud. I do this at like 3 in the morning and I sound like a maniac just talking to myself, but it really helps with my understanding because sometimes you think you know something but you really don't, and you don't realize it until you try to explain it. So yeah, this tip really helps for me. And my final tip is to utilize your notes and apply whatever you just learned. If you can't find online quizzes, that is honestly the best way of learning, just doing practice problems. And of course, if you don't know something, you can reference your notes again. And if you do get something wrong, I definitely recommend for you to write down the question and the answer. If I get something right only because I guessed it, I will also write it down on a piece of paper along with everything that I got wrong, so I can go back and reference it. Doing notes is definitely helpful, but I think the most helpful thing is to do past exams and practice problems. So that's about it for this video. I am honestly just an average person, and these are just things that I observed in my years as a student. And I'm still a student, I have many years to go, so if you guys have any other study tips, definitely let me know because I can definitely use them, and I'm pretty sure other students can use them as well. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will be back next week with a plan with me.